Hi everyone, welcome back to Dad's Planning Politics. In case you've forgotten our names or in case you haven't looked at the podcast before, my name's Frederica and this is my dad, Mark.
Hi everyone. It's been a few weeks since we've been chatting to you with Freddie's exams and travel, but we wanted to connect with you and talk through a few things, the latest on the Iran war, the change of leadership in the UK, and lastly, the rise of the Community Strong Australia Party.
Definitely. Do you want to start us off?
Yes, so let's start off with Iran. Goodness, Iran has attacked a Singapore flag ship oil tanker coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. The US has retaliated, so this very, very light ceasefire is in trouble already. Clearly the actions by Israel in southern Lebanon has also aggravated the scenario, and there's really a bit of a gap opening up between the US and Israel because their different objectives here are becoming rather clear. So, the oil price dropped and the markets improved. And again, this zigzagging scenario that we've been experiencing for the last few months continues.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think that this is a case of misplaced priorities, you could say. You could say that Trump has been quite interested in what's been happening in Iran for a long time, but now he's got his hands full with a lot of stuff happening in the US at the moment. So I think that he likes to move where the power and where the influence is. And at the moment, it seems like that power and influence is coming out of America. Like we have the FIFA World Cup happening in America and Canada and Mexico. Trump is holding his own 250-year celebration of the USA, which has been hilariously unsuccessful so far. So he's been shifting away, it seems, from Iran. And yeah, it does look like the ceasefire is in danger. I think that it's about time for everyone in order to stop more unnecessary hurt. The US has already recognized that they've spent a lot of money on attacking Iran, and they're now having to give money to Iran in order to rebuild a lot of a lot of the area in Iran that has been bombed. And it feels like a lose-lose scenario. So hopefully the ceasefire will prevail.
And it's interesting because Trump had always been critical of the Obama Iran deal, but many of the pundits say this deal is not as good as the original deal that they had with Iran. So it's really ironic after all this expenditure and loss of life and destruction, and we're in a probably a worse position than the world is than it was before the war.
I mean, I think that's a given. I think that's very much of course, we're in a worse position. I mean, the war did not have to happen. The war was definitely urged on by foreign powers. Look, like Iran obviously is a very unpredictable, unstable nation, but we weren't ever going to come to a peaceful conclusion to their nuclear race by bombing them. It was always going to be a diplomatic way. You can limit people's advance in their nuclear technologies definitely by bombing their nuclear factories, etc. But it doesn't stop them forever and it doesn't make them put down the guns. So, yeah, we've seen their reaction to that. And I don't think you want to deal with a volatile state like Iran. I think that Trump is used to being the single volatile actor, doing whatever he would like to do, regardless of the consequences. And I don't think he's used to having another powerhouse step in his way. Equally unpredictable.
Well, as you know, he's got a short span of attention, and he'd hoped everything would be over before the July 4th, 250th anniversary celebration. So, this is the interesting learning experience for the US administration. Not that I think they'll learn it, that you can't always expect to have a Venezuela type situation, particularly when you're dealing with a country like Iran.
Of course not. And I think that's the principal reason we have diplomatic strategies in the first place and diplomatic corridors is because there are nations out there like Iran that are powerful and there's a lot of unknowns in the equation that you can't factor in. A lot of unknowns about their military capacity and their nuclear capacity. And so bombing them without any consideration of any of these leads to a very dangerous situation where you can't predict the outcome. And that's what Trump has assured for himself. And yeah, definitely the agreements that were made before, they actually had some really interesting agreements on nuclear deproliferation before Trump was in power, and Iran had agreed to slowing down a lot of their production of nuclear power and weapons, and then Trump essentially went and got rid of all of that progress.
And just as an aside, there's been a terrible earthquake in Venezuela. And again, this should be a good test of the US. They've taken over the country, right? Hopefully, they're going to now flood the country with aid and support to help them
Of
recover
course
from this
not.
terrible
I mean, I don't
earthquake.
think they took over the country, they took over the oil.
Yeah,
Like,
I
I
know,
don't
but they
think that they give a
absolutely.
crap about anyone in the country or any place in the country. All they wanted was access to the oil.
Well, let's see what happens with that. It's an interesting test, a further
We
test
all
of
know
that.
what's going to happen with that, but yes, this is true. You can count it as another test, but I don't know how many tests they have to fail before everyone decides that they're doing a
One
bad job.
constantly needs tests if you're going to have a hopeful view of the world.
We don't need to have a hopeful view of Trump. I
You
think
need a
that
hopeful
you've
view of the world.
I'm saying I don't have a hopeful view of Trump. You're saying we need to be hopeful about Trump's reaction to Venezuela. That's saying being hopeful of the Trump administration and their actions. They're never going to do anything that's like going to help anyone other than Trump himself and the MAGA
Yeah,
cohort. That's not in their nature. I
you're
am
probably right.
right. Everyone knows this. I feel like sometimes, Daddy, you need to. I don't know what like far right media you're taking in, but I like the world has sailed. The ship has sailed. Trump is like a dictator. He's a terrible person. Like he's a sex offender, as the Aussie boys have been chanting in their World Cup footy chants over in America. He is a sex offender. He has helped Israel commit genocide. We are a long ways from him just being that talk show host on American TV.
Yep, that's true. All right, shall we move on to a big change in UK leadership? Keir Starmer's days are numbered. Andy Burnham won the Makerfield by-election, which was quite an achievement because Reform was expected to win. They were expected to win 80% chance of winning. So he turned that around and he actually got a good, there was a huge turnout of people and he won a very handsome margin. So the hopeful thing for the Labor Party is finally they might have a leader who can tackle reform. So as a result of that win, Keir Starmer has resigned, and Wes Streeting, the former health minister, has said he's not going to run and puts his weight behind Andy Burnham. So in a sense, Andy Burnham is being crowned as the next head of the Labor Party and thus the next Prime Minister of the UK. Now, I think this is a positive move because Keir Starmer is so boring and so lacking in communication capability that there's no way he could have won the next election. So it's time. I think it's good that they've moved and hopefully Burnham can do a better job.
Yeah, I agree. Despite anything that he did going forward, the media had turned against him, and I don't think there was any way that he could pull them back. He had a media persona which was not liked, which was disagreeable, which was boring, which could not convey empathy or warmth of any kind. The UK was not in a good situation economically, and there was nothing he could do to put up this illusion of good leadership any longer. So yeah, it was great that he resigned the other day. And there's been a lot on the internet about how there's been since David Cameron, no British Prime Minister has lasted their full term in government, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. There's been so much volatility in the British electoral system. And look, we'll see if Andy Burnham can hopefully bring some stability to this. To me, I don't know about you, but it seems very reminiscent of the US elections and what happened with Biden and, the confusion around Biden and whether he was running or not. And then the last minute decision to put Kamala in, some say is what caused her failure in the election. There wasn't enough time. So maybe they're trying to rectify that issue by rallying behind him, putting him in, having no question of doubt in their candidate. I don't think that even the Tories, the Conservative Party, I don't think that they have called into question Parliament's leadership, which is interesting because we see even the Tories doing little to undermine Andy Burnham's rise to power. Like the only people who are calling a vote of no confidence are Reform and Nigel Farage. So that really says something about the Tories' respect for the stability of the country. And look, I agree. I think regardless of if it was a Tory Prime Minister or a Labour Prime Minister, we do want to stop that far right party from gaining power. And I think it's very sensible that the Tories understand that and they're following through with that.
Well, I think it is interesting. There is some call that he needs to call an election because he hasn't been voted as prime minister, but I think they'll ignore that scenario. In a way, it's good that Keir Starmer resigned and he did the right thing by the country. He's not like a Biden hanging on, because we've got multiple years till the next election. So it's good that they make the change more quickly and more seamlessly. And it seems like Andy Burnham is good. And I was just listening to a session that Malcolm Turnbull did the other day talking about Starmer, and they're both barristers, right? But Turnbull was saying Starmer is astoundingly bad at speech. He would read all his speeches in the dispatch
Yeah.
box in Parliament, and this is just pathetic, right? Because and Malcolm said, I can't understand, he's been a barrister, he must have sort of performed in court. How can he not be comfortable just learning a script and speaking it from the heart, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, I don't know. It's a very interesting question, and I guess it just says that some people shouldn't be political animals. They don't have it in them. Yeah, so it's definitely a positive thing that they are turning this around so quickly, and we'll see what Andy Burnham does. But even the head of the Liberal Democrats, he was warning how we could end up in a very similar situation where it seems like Andy Burnham so seamlessly replaces Keir Starmer that people don't notice a difference in their policy. And Andy Burnham is really going to have to stand out and enact fast changes quickly in order to
Fast
change the
and
public
big.
perception of the Labour Party. Yeah, big things are going to
Yeah,
need to
fast
happen.
and big.
Otherwise, Nigel Farage will still be in the same popular position that he was in before all of this.
Fast and big chambers. And Jim Chalmers, I just saw him interviewed the other day. He was being asked this about One Nation in Australia, and I think it's the same with right wing parties around the world. If governments don't make big, dramatic moves and keep moving and keep developing new policies that respond to the issues of the populace, it opens the way for these right wing parties. So I thought it was a very interesting topic. So, for example, in the UK, the fact that Starmer didn't fund the UK military to the point that they needed to and their defence minister resigned, I find is pathetic, right? Given there's a war going on with Russia. These sorts of things are really basic to the future, and it seems like he wasn't willing to make a captain's call to say what's important and overrule the UK Treasury.
You know what's fascinating? It feels like we're entering a world where the political consciousness of the country really dictates the leader's fate. So, typically I feel we would have issues, the leaders would deal with them, things would go wrong, etc. The leaders could make decisions about the amount of defense that they were putting into the country, the amount of money that they were giving to defense. But now, if you go against what the public political consciousness says, everyone pushes to right wing. So it feels like you have no choice but to obey what the public wants from you. And I wonder how far that goes in terms of, centre left parties like Labour pushing further right in order to agree with what the media and what the everyday person is putting out into the world.
I don't agree with pushing further right, Freddie. I think the Sanchez and others in Spain, they're not pushing further right, they're just getting on with the
I'm not
job of
talking
dealing
about
with
Sanchez. When did I say Sanchez?
lack of housing, inflation issues, climate change issues, all these things, which is what the Labor government in Australia is trying to do.
Wait, no, I'm not talking about that though. I'm saying that defense. We're talking about defense. The increase in money to defense.
Why is
I'm
that a
saying that
right wing
that's
thing?
that is right wing to increase
I don't
the
agree
amount of
that
money
it's
that
right
you're
wing. I
giving to
think
your
it's mainstream.
military.
Actually, I think it's centre. When there's a war going on in
Or
Europe,
maybe
I
there's
don't
been a
put it as right
shift
wing.
to the right, center right.
I don't agree. I think it's right in the middle of people's concerns, right?
Okay,
I don't
agree to
agree with it.
disagree. Okay. I didn't say I'm moderately right wing. To increase defense spending, increasing military spending. Sorry, let's think back to like all the protests against the Vietnam War and against every war
I
that's
get
ever
it, but
happened.
that's
Those protests were
that was
led
an
by the left
irrelevant
wing, were they
war for
not?
many people, whereas there's war on the doorsteps of Europe, right? There's Russian frigates, going through the English Channel and firing on a UK yacht. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, look, but it does seem that Europe has enough capacity to be putting more boots on the ground without increasing their defense spending otherwise. I feel like their defense spending is saying they're preparing for more conflicts, not just the Russia-Ukraine war.
They need to prepare for more conflict because Putin is a maniac and he wants far more than Ukraine. So it's good that they prepare, I think. And it's good
Putin's
that they
army is,
outspend
I mean,
Russia
we're
because
getting
they're by far a bigger
sidetracked
economy.
because we need to stick to the topics. But I do think that Russia has been severely weakened by this war. Like there's only so many people who want to fight for money if they
They're
don't
still
care about what
going.
they're
That's the
fighting for.
problem.
They're still going. That doesn't mean that they can launch a land-based campaign that's going to take over all of Europe.
Anyway, as a European, I would rather be sure of that and I'd be happy to invest more in defence, as I think the majority of people in Europe are.
It gets to
And
a
they also
turning
need to be
point, though.
independent of the US, right? The only way to do that is to really invest big time yourself. And, the other interesting thing was here, we've still got this stupid AUKUS thing in Australia. And again, Malcolm was suggesting, that the UK submarine program is a joke, right? They're never going to be able to build this stuff. What they should do is combine with France and combined effort on submarines, and they might be able to deliver something, which I think was a really smart idea and something that Burnham should consider.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I agree with that. And I think I'll just clear up what I'm saying quickly. I'm not saying that I don't think it's necessary to increase defense spending. I'm saying that what it says for the world is not a good thing. Like you have two boys. They live in houses next door to each other, yeah? They get Nerf guns. Every few weeks they buy some new Nerf bullets. They get more and more and more. These boys aren't gonna sit with their Nerf guns and their Nerf bullets and not do anything. If one of them shoots the other, they're gonna shoot back. And it gets to a turning point where the more weapons I think that you've amassed, the more likely a really dangerous outcome is going to happen. It's just the tension is increasing. And I'm just saying I think that's a dangerous thing for the world. But
It's a
like
dangerous thing, but I
it's
think
a
that's the
different
world we
question
live in.
whether okay. All right.
And I look on Ronald Reagan's doctrine of peace through strength, right? The only way the
With
end of the
Reagan.
Cold War happened was because the US had a lot of strength, right?
Well, look, I feel like it kind of came from within the Soviet Union. A lot of it.
Some of it. Anyway,
Gorbachev.
let's
That's another
let's move
topic,
on
but a lot
to
of the failure of the Soviet Union came from within because he destabilized the entire system itself and bent towards the West in a way that Stalin was never willing to.
Mhm. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the defence spending. So if we move to Australia, a few things happening there. The Over the last week, there's been the whole discussion of a monoculture versus a multicultural society, and the stuff that Pauline Hanson talked about in the press club. Angus Taylor has made a complete mess of it. He wouldn't agree that Australia is a multicultural country. And that's what we should all aspire to, and that's what it is. Anthony
What
Albanese
else
was
would
on
it
7 Plus.
be? Like even if you get rid of immigration from the past like 150 years, before that, it was still multicultural. The fact that there are indigenous people and white people, that is a multiculture.
Yes,
And then as
agreed.
soon as you're getting like Italians, multiculture, as soon as you get Greek people, multiculture, like the train has left the station. Like that's so ridiculous to claim that it's a monoculture. I think that it's been a founding part of national identity for quite a while that we are a multicultural country. And you know what I've found quite interesting in my politics degree recently is we have been looking into that sense of national identity and how it very much influences politics. So in the US, right, they have this sense of white national identity. And it's a very powerful thing. If we were to shift the Australian conception of what our identity is. If we were to change it to a multicultural identity, and that's what makes us special, and that's what makes us a great country, I think that it would have far reaching consequences for politics in general, because then as soon as people like Pauline Hanson make claims like this, they go down in the polls. And I think we've seen that happen recently. One Nation has been dropping in the polls.
I think you're right, Freddie. It's absolutely a multicultural country, and Albo was on 7:30 Report the other night. A wonderful response to that question, basically saying what you had, that Australia's always been a multicultural country. That's our core strength, that we can reflect the world and we can be really successful based on that. So anyway, yes, One Nation's down a bit. I think more down because of Pauline's discussion of not really agreeing with childcare. She got into some areas that were sort of dangerous for her, that, there shouldn't be so much childcare and people are lazy and la la la. So it was really rather interesting in that regard. And Angus Taylor is just stupid. I mean, clearly, and they're going down in the poll. There's
Just,
even talk already of should there be a change in leader in the Liberal Party.
do they have anyone left?
Yeah, they have the guy from Western Australia, the former soldier. I'm just forgetting his
Good.
name.
Well, there you go. That saves it. But let's move on
And
to
then the
more
other big
exciting
news
news.
is the
Go on.
rise of Community Strong Australia, which is a terrible name, but this is Zali Steggall and Allegra Spender setting up a new party, which is a follow on from the Teal success. And for those who are not aware, the Labor Party, together with the coalition, a year or so ago changed the funding laws for parties. You have to have a party if you're going to get funding from the federal government. You can't just be an independent. So there's a financial imperative for Zali and Allegra to do this. And so their plan is to expand this party and target seats like Bennelong, etc., because their view is that not everyone wants to vote for Labor or for One Nation, and there's a gap of who they can vote for because the Liberal Party is just in going down the abyss, and so there's an opportunity for a centre-right party to be really successful. So that's the premise here.
It definitely, I would even argue that yes, look, the name doesn't sound too catchy, but I think that it's quite effective in the sense that obviously you can abbreviate it, CSA. I think that it sounds to me, upon hearing it, just like this, hearing it roll off the tongue, it sounds more right wing than it does left wing. Community Strong Australia. It sounds very much like a one nation, like a come together, like that right wing kind of community that they are constantly trying to push into. I think they're constantly trying to rally around this concept of the country as being this monocultural community that everyone can be part of. And I think that this name reminds people that community is not just that that one thing. Community is lots of
It's true.
things. We can be a community
It's true.
without having a monoculture. And I actually think the name is quite effective in that way, in terms of its branding.
Anyway, look, it'll be interesting, and a lot of the other teals have not agreed to join yet, so that's interesting as well. That they're a bit nervous about losing their independent point of view, and they've said there's not going to be there's not going to be one leader. Both Zali and Allegra are both leaders of the party, so it'll be interesting how this plays out coming over the next year or so before the election, and how many candidates they get to run for them going forward. And whether Simon Holmes à Court will continue to fund them as he has in the past.
And it's interesting as well because I have seen statements put out saying that Climate 200 has nothing to do with this new party. And I wonder then if they are not taking funding, if that means they're not taking funding from Simon Holmes Court, where are they getting their funding from? And then they're going to be making up a huge funding gap that is now appearing. There's a lot of big questions when it comes to this, so it would definitely be interesting to see how it proceeds. And look, I would say two of the most impressive politicians of the moment with very impressive records in Australian politics, both Sally Segal and Allegra Spender. I think that out of any of the independents, they would have been the two I would have liked to see start this party. So I'm really excited to see what happens for them and where they go with this.
Yeah, it'll be super, super interesting. Anyway, Freddie, lovely speaking to you. It's good to catch up. And for our listeners, we will make sure we're back in 2 weeks' time to keep you abreast of everything that's happening. In the
We will,
meantime,
we
stay
will.
well and like and share this podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, guys.